Hi everybody, this is Michael Hildebrand and I'm your host on the Sleeptrust podcast, where I'm talking about how to gain back trust in your ability to have a superb sleep again. In this week's episode of the Sleeptrust podcast, we are going to talk about Stop It, the top 5 things you should really avoid if you want to have a good night's sleep. And these are my personal top 5, so there's no specific order hooked up to any kind of numbers. It's just what I experience or what I personally believe to be a bad habit when it comes to sleep quality. And I actually borrowed the Stop It from a lovely sketch from Bob Newhart is his name. It's about a woman coming to a therapist and she's kind of explaining him her problem, and he just reacts with, it's kind of really funny situation. He tells her, you see, my sessions usually do not go over 5 minutes, and she's really kind of astonished and says, and it'll cost you $5, and don't give any change, and everything builds up kind of like this. And then she gets a minute or something like that to start to tell this therapist all about her problems. And he just looks at her and says, okay, I've got 2 words for you. And I want you to listen very clearly. And, she's has 100% attention focused on him. And then he just takes a deep breath and says, "Stop it." So he yells at her. And she's kind of shocked. And that's how it basically goes on. And there is, as funny as it is, and of course, it's not, there is a legit reason for therapists to be out there. And they're doing a great job for many people, but there is a neuroscience behind this Stop It. And the reason I'm telling you this is because when we're talking about the top 5 reasons to stop it, to get a high quality sleep, it's all about change and changing habits and breaking through neural pathways. And basically neural pathways build up the more often we think about things. So in the moment you step down a route thinking about something you are doing that you don't want to do, you're strengthening that pathway. And therefore you're giving energy into something that you do not want to have anymore. That's kind of the neuroscience behind it. And that's why this is also the Bob Newhart sketch is one of the favorite sketches of Mark Waldman. He's a neuro coach at NeuroGym, a company that belongs to a guy called John Assaraf. The one or the other of you may be familiar with him because he showed up in the film The Secret. And he's got a couple of great coaching programs out there too. But now let's jump into my personal top 5 when it comes to things that you should really avoid if you want to have a superb sleep. And number 5 is to avoid bright light. So when it comes to bedtime, about an hour before you go to bed, try to really dim down your lights. Use light bulbs that aren't that light as you would use them at daytime when you want to work. Also try to get blue light reduced ones. You can buy them out there. I'm going to share a couple of links in the show notes to bulbs that you can buy on Amazon, and they're not that expensive. And that way you will support your melatonin production, and melatonin is important as it is our sleep hormone. And by the way, if you're not a Facebook fan already, you should really check out our Facebook page, because especially this week, we're going to post everything all around these 5 tips that can help you to really avoid these things and help you to get better habits in place. We'll also link up to older episodes that can really support you in getting a better understanding what it means to change habits. And you will also get to see the absolute funny video from Bob Newhart. It's only 5 or 6 minutes, but you really should have a look at that one. So let's move on to number 4 on my list. And this one was kind of slipping up and down, but eventually it landed on number 4. So it is to avoid smartphones and TV usage at least half an hour, better an hour before you go to bed. And there are 2 reasons for this. The first reason is kind of related to the light aspect, as these displays emit blue light, and blue light suppresses the melatonin production, which we need to sleep good. But the second one I find to be even more important. You just get distracted from your life. So let's say you have kind of a worry thought, something in your head. The time you spend in front of your TV, you kind of do not give your mind place to think about that problem and to come up with a solution, or to kind of just settle it in your mind, in your body. So that is a thing that may pop up as soon as you just go to bed, when you don't want it to pop up. And the second thing is about the smartphones. You should really put in the do not disturb button and the flight mode. And the flight mode is good because you don't want to have electrosmog in your bedroom. At least I do not want to have so. And the do not disturb button will really prevent notifications overnight from apps or even phone calls, which, if you have it in flight mode, they won't come through anyway. But if you don't, it will prevent you from getting disturbed during nighttime. Number 3 is very straightforward and very easy. It is to not eat heavy meals before you go to bed. So try to avoid that. Generally speaking, try to not eat too heavy in the evening, and try to stop eating a couple of hours before you go to bed. And if you think you're hungry before you go to bed, I personally would eat something, but I would try to let it not be too much that I eat before I go to bed. And I would just eat something like a banana that would fill you up, but is not too heavy on your digestive system. Bananas also have tryptophan, which is a great thing to have, because it kind of can result in melatonin too. It goes through serotonin, then melatonin. So this would be a good thing, an option to think about. And you can eat other things too, but try to get something that it's not that heavy. So we're getting closer to the top. Point number 2 is to avoid drinking alcohol or taking sleeping tablets before you go to bed. Let's start with the second topic, sleeping tablets. If you got these tablets prescribed from your doctor, please talk with him about this, if this is an option for you. Generally speaking, many of those people who are taking sleeping tablets do not actually need them, but as soon as you start taking them, your body may get kind of used to them. So what will happen is that you'll have to take more, and your sleep will not have the high quality that you could have and will have if you stop taking them. The same is true for alcohol, and I love my glass of wine and a glass of beer from time to time, but if we drink alcohol, it will help us to fall asleep faster. I did a self-test on this, and even for one glass of wine, that was true. I went to bed and it was really relaxing, of course, no surprise. But the sleep quality that you will get will not be as good, because it kind of has an impact on our sleep structure. So try to avoid drinking alcohol and taking sleeping tablets. That's number 2. And now let's move on to the winner of the things that you should really avoid if you want to have a good night's sleep. Here is number 1. And this is to stop worrying and being angry at bedtime. And this is a hard one. Worries and anger can be like a tsunami for our sleep. If we let it, it will just wash it away. And if you say, like I hear so often, I cannot change that, it's simply how it is, that's me, you'll be right. But on the same side, you're absolutely wrong, because if you could not change your habits and you would just work as you are programmed, so to say, you would be nothing more than a machine, but you're not. You're a human. And you can take a conscious decision on what you want and what you don't want, and you can change. And this is really a benefit that, if you have a hard time thinking about that, you should really start doing this first in the morning. think about and say, I am so thankful that I am a human and that I know that I can change anything I want to. And that's going to be a good start. Then you have to put in the effort to really change things. So the stop it from Bob is a great way to kind of create awareness around things or habits you do not want to have. Just hear that stop it. So have a look at the movie, the little video, and that's going to set that little voice into your head, stop it. And then you kind of want to have a look at if you're worrying when you're lying in bed or if you're angry. Both are emotions we do not really want to have. Worries are kind of mostly a look into the past or into the future. The past is already the past, so it's nothing, worth worrying about. And the future is yet to come. I've got an own podcast about worries and own about anger. You may want to have a deeper look into those topics if you want to change something. And the anger part is a little bit more about forgiveness. So forgiving others, forgiving yourself. And if you think, I'm not going to forgive this beep, you're not doing it for him or her. You're doing it for yourself. So maybe that thought may help in practicing forgiveness. And as soon as you tackle these two things, you will be able to have a superb sleep again. And it's your choice if you want to give your energy into things like worry and anger before you go to bed or not. So these were my personal top 5 things to avoid if you want to have a good night's sleep. And if the one or other point relates to you, you really might want to check out the Facebook page where we're going to post tips over the course of the week that will address these 5 points. You may also want to have a look at the show notes because there is additional Sleeptrust material for several of these points that can really help you to tackle these 5 things. Please also consider getting active in the community. So you can do so best if you join us at Facebook. You'll find us if you just type Sleeptrust into the search box. And then you could share your number 1 thing that keeps you from falling asleep and how you handle this. And you could share this right underneath the podcast of this week's episode that we're going to publish on Facebook too. Another super simple way to get more information about this podcast episode is to simply visit the sleeptrust.eu website. On the main page, you'll find a link to this podcast episode and you'll see the show notes where we have all links prepared for you to use. So let's wrap up this week's episode of the Sleeptrust podcast together. When we want to avoid things, we have to stop old behavior. Bob Newhart has a funny way of breaking our neural pathways here. The top 5 things that we want to avoid to have a good night's sleep is to not get into bright light about an hour before we go to bed, to avoid smartphone and TV usage at least a half an hour before we go to bed and at nighttime, to not eat heavy meals at least 4 hours before we go to sleep, to avoid drinking alcohol or taking sleeping tablets. Remember, if you're taking sleeping tablets, to ask your doctor if you can reduce them. And the number 1 thing to avoid is to avoid worries and anger when we are lying in bed. I hope you enjoyed yourself and that you tune in next week when we're going to move on from the avoiding part of life to the empowering part and going to talk about the top 5 things that will really let you experience a better sleep. Until then, have a superb sleep. Hey there, and thanks for listening to the Sleeptrust podcast. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you want to get further information on this podcast or material that will help you to gain back your sleep trust, please check out sleeptrust.eu. That's sleeptrust.eu, where you will get lots of information around sleep. And here comes some legal stuff. Everything on this podcast is my opinion only, so do not take it as an advice, as I am not a doctor, nor have I considered your personal situation. If you feel that you need medical advice, please consider getting an appointment at your doctor of trust. If you want to give me any kind of feedback on this podcast, feel free to email me at podcast@sleeptrust.eu. I hope you tune in again next week, and until then, have a good sleep.